Welcome yet again to another episode of the New Dad Rock. And I know last time in the 1990 episode, we said the world was splintering and that undergoing some sort of fragmentation and realignment. And in 1991, that all came to be.
The New Dad Rock! Dad by day! Podcaster by night! Hosts Keith and Steve, two college radio DJs in the 90s, helped expose bands like Nirvana, Pavement, and PJ Harvey. They went to shows, interviewed musicians, and reviewed albums for various Zions papers. They worked security at concerts and West, even did loading for Fish. Now, they're dads. Whether you want to explore lesser-known music or take a trip down memory lane, tune to the New Dad Rock. Join hosts Keith and Steve as they navigate the ages together, sharing a little about music across various eras and genres. Always well-intentioned, often well-informed, seldom boring. The New Dad Rock will expand your mind.
All right, so 1991 was so brimming with activity, so much good stuff, that I just had to invite my good friend Bryan on the show.
Another Bryan?
Yeah. Only Bryan's come on the show.
Thanks for having me, team. This is quite an honor. I feel like I'm having a celebrity moment.
It happens. It happens to the best of you.
It happens to all the Bryans on our episodes. All right, so 1991. Steve, what happened in 91?
Well, like I said in the intro, 1990 was kind of a mixed bag, and all of a sudden, 91 exploded. So I had graduated high school and started college, and in the fall of 91, I actually became a college radio DJ, like it says in our bio. So looking back, I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it was just the perfect time for me to transform from the 80s metalhead into the college radio DJ of the 90s.
See, this is why I don't like the years, because school years are different. So in 91, I graduate high school in June, and I go to college, your college, our college, in September of 91.
And later, I don't remember the specific month, we meet. So kind of a big year, not only for music or history or the New Dad Rock. So Bryan, you got to work your way into that. We've laid down the gauntlet. Maybe
yeah,
can,
it's interesting because I think in listening to both of you, I'm a couple of years younger than you. So I was a sophomore, junior in high school. And as I've listened to you talk about the music of the 80s, the years where you were like sophomores and junior in high school, you can really feel it coming through. And so part of my urgency to get on the 1991 episode is you two are now like in college, which gets to be a very different vibe towards the music than you were in high school. So 91 was a big year for me. And I was only about 12 months away from becoming a high school DJ at my boarding school.
Wow, high school DJ.
Yeah, because we lived in dorms, so you could have a radio station that just covered the boarding school's campus.
So that's fantastic. Did they have a format? Like,
they
was
had
there
just different like hour slots, and people could basically just go. You're playing for like maybe 13 people. You know what I mean? So
our podcast.
We know it well.
Actually, so there was a format at our radio station, right, Steve, at WGSU?
There was a format, but Keith and I chose to take the 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. shift, so we didn't have to follow. So we didn't have to follow the format. So 13 people. If we got 13 people over the course of the semester, I would be impressed. But we definitely did have the student representative of the radio station calling to certainly let us know that she was listening and to get certain songs off the air immediately, like Dead Milkmen VFW. Right before they got to the chorus of "Fucked Up World, we're all living in a
fucked up world." Nice. All right, so 1991, the craziest thing was that 6-week period, right, in August, September, when the Metallica Black Album came out.
Yeah, so this shows you my literal transformation in time. And Bryan, I don't know if you felt this back, as a sophomore. I mean, I think you're right at the cusp of that age. But I remember being so pumped about the Metallica Black Album coming out. I remember going to the store at like 9 a.m. and buying it, and then going over to my girlfriend's house. And then we went to the store again to buy it for her. So I essentially bought the album twice.
I remember exactly when the kid, who I don't even remember his name now, but I can see clear as day in my mind when he came into our dorm room and said he had copies of both Use Your Illusions 1 and 2 on CD.
Yeah.
And we could not get them into the stereo fast enough.
That is amazing. Yeah, so that was a big wait because Appetite for Destruction was 87. Yeah, GNR Lies came out, but that was kind of a appetizer. So it was 4 full years until the Use Your Illusions, and there's 2 full albums. They come out. I remember the Black Album. Prior to the Black Album coming out, Enter Sandman gets released. So, I mean, talk about a teaser there. And then I get to college and I'm learning the ropes as a college radio DJ, and officially Nevermind didn't come out until September 24th, but we had it in the station because remember I'm sure this is true at high school stations too, but all the radio stations got their albums weeks ahead of release so they could promote them. And I remember on my very first show, one of the first songs I played was Drain You. And it was because the format said you had to play one of these albums in the blue category, and this was the blue category. I'm making that up, and I know it had a bluish cover. And I was like, oh, this song looks cool, Drain You. And it changed my world.
The other thing about Guns N' Roses that I remember distinctly, because I was like a 16-year-old boy, was that Terminator 2 came out that summer. And the You Can Be Mine song was like the theme song to that Terminator 2 track. And there was so much hype about Terminator 2 coming out. And the fact that the new song from the new Guns N' Roses double album kind of came together with Terminator 2 was like, at that age, like 16 years old, I couldn't stand it.
Dude,
couldn't get it fast enough.
You could buy a cassette tape that was like a single. It came in like in a weird cardboard box that you slid out top. I had that, so it was a 99-cent single. I had that. You Will Be Mine. I played it all the time in my car. Actually, I didn't have a car. I played it all the time in my parents' car. Yeah, You Will Be Mine was good.
Yeah. So another album that came out during this period that was ubiquitous everywhere, and I think kept Metallica off the number 1 was Garth Brooks. Do you guys remember this?
Yeah.
It was so disappointing. And I think that was the beginning of country. Remember, alt country became good, or became very big in the next couple of years. So that was another album that came out in this period. And then I don't think I noticed it at the time, or I don't know if everyone else was cognizant of it at the time, but Pearl Jam 10 and Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden came out during this period. And Blood Sugar Sex Magik actually came out also September 24th, the same day as Nevermind.
Yeah, I think the only album that I knew of that came out like live was Guns N' Roses. Everything else was I kind of discovered later. Okay, so are you saying this is the beginning of the New Dad Rock? Is this 6-week period?
I mean, I think it's a coincidence. I think looking back now, it's a coincidence that this musical transformation that I was going through was as I was going through high school and college and becoming a college radio DJ. Because one of the things I learned as a college radio DJ was that the Red Hot Chili Peppers were on tour and they were going to go to Rochester, and the opening bands were called Smashing Pumpkins, which in October of 1991, I was like, is this like a Halloween band? What is going on here? And Pearl Jam, which I thought was just the stupidest name. I was like, what is happening here? But that was an actual tour. It was Pearl Jam opening for Smashing Pumpkins, opening for Red Hot Chili Peppers. And the whole reason that Pearl Jam even ended up on that tour was because the drummer of the time at Red Hot Chili Peppers was Jack Irons, who we all know later became the drummer for Pearl Jam. So he did Pearl Jam a favor and then certainly was repaid back in kind.
So Jack Irons is the one who got the tape from Mookie Blaylock and gave it to Eddie Vedder down in wherever it was, LA or San Diego. And that's how he ended up meeting up with the guys who became Pearl Jam.
Right. And I think at the time, so Mother Love Bone is breaking up. There's Soundgarden is starting to make it. there's a lot going on, and musicians are in bands who haven't made it yet are traveling between bands. And so there were other incarnations of bands at the time. And I think, Bryan, you wanted to bring up one of those.
Yeah, for sure. Temple of the Dog, one of my favorite bands that I wish had been a band, There was this kind of like, with the Seattle bands, almost like this polyamorous thing. Totally. Where like they were playing across bands. I think another one that's really forgotten about is Mad Season, which has Lane Staley, the lead singer of Alice in Chains, playing with the lead guitarist of Pearl Jam, Mike McCready, the drummer for the Screaming Trees, and then like this bassist that they all met in rehab, And so they recorded this one album, Mad Season, which is awesome because it's actually one of Lane Staley's like happiest periods, and he was really dark and struggled with drug abuse with Alice in Chains. But Temple of the Dog was really like the original one, and there's so many like what might have beens, I think, when I listened to that album, because Chris Cornell, who I now, looking back as like a 25-year listener of 90s music, like I think he's the guy I would pick. Like who is the Seattle sound after multiple decades is Chris Cornell. And he was, Soundgarden and Audioslave, but it's like he never had the great band. He was like the lead singer that just never got to put together the all-star
He was
team.
Definitely the voice. He was
totally
was the Ronnie James Dio of Seattle grunge.
Yeah, so it's crazy because I was as I was thinking about this, I saw this clip from Howard Stern where Chris Cornell was interviewed by Howard Stern in 2011, and he's talking a lot about Andrew Wood, the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, and so it's they were roommates and everything, and it's clearly deferential to Andrew Wood was gonna be the guy. He was going to be the breakout next major star, and Mother Love Bone was gonna be so good. And everybody, all these other bands that kind of followed his death, all referenced that this was just like the guy, And he said something I always thought, which was Andrew Wood was kind of like half hair metal, like half like Motley Crue, Poison, and then also had like the punk and kind of Seattle sound emerging, which you can really hear in Mother Love Bone. And Chris Cornell says in this interview, when Andrew Wood died, like we lost the bridge. Like he was going to be the bridge guy between the two things. And so it became its own untethered music sound.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't go out to invent a new sound. It was a local scene, and they're all competing for spots, for audiences, for sales, for T-shirt sales, for record deals, and they're looking at each other as competition. They're not really concerned with what's going out in LA or New York or London or Japan at the time. They're doing what's in that neighborhood. And the biggest band at the time in that scene was the Melvins.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's those bands, Mother Love Bone, Mudhoney, the Melvins. They were kind of like the predecessors before the big wave that came later. Yeah,
so you had the sludgy sound of the Melvins. You had the punk of Mudhoney, and you just had the pop sensibility of Kurt Cobain to form Nirvana. And I think that's what set them stratospherically. He put together the perfect 3-minute pop song 12 times over on Nevermind, and they just went off the charts. But all these other bands behind them, like you said, they're all there. They're all competing with each other. They're all sharing members. And thankfully, the music industry isn't very inventive, and they just went to Seattle and they signed up all those other bands. And, luckily we got to hear them all.
And dress like them. It was perfect. In college, I had flannels. It was great. I had long hair. Man, the Halcyon years.
Wait, it's kind of unfortunate, it's almost like that fashion sensibility of like the thrift store flannel shirts was a statement on like mainstream fashion, and then it became the mainstream fashion.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
Of course it did. We're not claiming mass popular culture is brilliant.
Yeah, but I do wonder with Temple of the Dog, just to finish that thought, it's like the Pearl Jam guys from Mother Love Bone had just met Eddie Vedder. You know, that's why he's on the Temple of the Dog album, because he's like in town getting to know them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if that intro hadn't happened, what if Chris Cornell had joined up with the drummer and bassist who became Pearl Jam? You know, like I wonder if that could have been the moment that if Temple of the Dog had stayed together and Eddie Vedder like missed his flight or something and wasn't on the album to record Hunger Strike, if that could have been Cornell's band.
You know, okay, you've mentioned that to me before, and I thought about it. I'm reading a Chris Cornell book now, and I made it to Audioslave year, so I'm past the Soundgarden year. And it sounds like, I mean, he had his own band, right? Like, he was, like, friends with, you know, the drummer kid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think he had his own thing going. I don't think his sound would go with Jeff and Stone.
I think they were the tail end of the metal scene. They were kind of doing their own thing, a little bit more punk rock. But Soundgarden, to me, especially in the early years, is a metal band. Yeah. And, you know, so coming out of the 80s, of course, you had hair metal that was very popular. Yeah. But that sound that was starting to take over. So thrash was the mid to late 80s. But at the very end, you started to get, and you hear it on Anthrax Persistence of Time, you start to get bands like Sepultura in there. And on the other end, you have Primus, and Faith No More, I think, was considered a heavy metal band at the time. So you have that funk coming in. So you can see where this is going with nu metal is going to come out there as well. So you could almost argue, what if nu metal got the first leg up, and instead of Nirvana making it big, nu metal makes it big, and what does Soundgarden sound like in that standpoint?
So Soundgarden toured with Faith No More multiple times, multiple continents, so that they were put together in a single show. But Soundgarden was opening for Metallica multiple times, including a later Lollapalooza. Like, that was, Metallica requested Soundgarden to open for them, even though the Metallica fans kind of seemed to have hated them because they'd throw shit at them.
You mentioned Lollapalooza. 1991 is the first Lollapalooza. And if you look at that lineup, no one in that lineup could be even considered close to grunge. No. But Jane's Addiction might sound like where Mother Love Bone was going to go, because there's that kind of glam, like you said, with Andrew Wood having that connection to hair metal. And I think Jane's Addiction, just being from LA and just having, you know, let's be honest, I think Dave Navarro could have been very happy as a hair metal god.
Totally.
It's interesting to wonder if Jane's Addiction had been in Seattle, like what would have happened to them instead of LA. If they were just part of the scene.
Well, it's kind of funny. Them. It's kind of funny. We talk about all these bands in the grunge era, but you know who the biggest band in Seattle in 1991 was, don't you?
Is it Heart?
No, it was Queensryche.
Oh,
so
sorry.
In 1990, Empire had come out, and by 1991, the song of the year that was ubiquitous was Silent Lucidity.
Silent Lucidity. Yeah, right. Great video, too. Great classic, iconic MTV video.
But it's just crazy. You mentioned all these what ifs, and you know, maybe Andrew Wood was inspired by Queensryche. you know, it wouldn't be that far out of the realm, but it's you know, you looking back, and if everyone was to do a historical show, like if you had a podcast and we're talking about 1991, of course you're going to talk about grunge. You also had Lollapalooza, and then U2's Achtung Baby came out in 1991 against a backdrop of popular songs like The Divinals' I Touch Myself, Right Here, Right Now by Jesus Jones.
Love that song.
And Big Audio Dynamite 2 with Rush.
Hey, Bryan.
Achtung Baby was so good. That's still like maybe my favorite album ever. I don't know if you guys have seen that. If you've seen the documentary From the Sky Down, which came out on the 20th anniversary of Achtung Baby, they it's kind of it tells a great story. I'm recapping some of the documentary. U2 was really kind of lost after Rattle and Hum. You know, they had kind of jumped the shark, and it wasn't clear that the early U2, the iconic early U2 sound, like Boy and Joshua Tree, that they were going to be able to maintain that, and they had kind of like, in their minds, they had run out the table on, or run out the string on that type of sound. So they go to this castle after being basically apart for like a year, And it's really cool. They're talking about how like the Edge is like just in Germany listening to like industrial and Bono's just kind of like lost doing like this kind of solo stuff. So they go to this castle and they're just like, we have to let go of the past. And they just start jamming. The best part of the documentary is they're listening to these 8 tracks from their jam sessions when they find the set of beats that becomes one, the slow guitar song from that album. And you hear like Bono and the Edge remember like, yeah, that was the moment we got the chord progression like 20 years later. And they're like, we built the whole album around this. And that just took you to a different, they became like a stadium band at that point. And they became like, we're going to be the biggest band in the world. We're going to be in all the Coca-Cola commercials now. Like we're no longer like this little Irish band anymore. But that, I was so happy that U2 like reinvented themselves and survived versus just kind of was over when they were like in their early 30s.
Yeah, I was a fan of U2 when War was the newest album. So I was like 12 years old. A good friend's older brother played bass in a band, and U2 was one of his favorite bands. So I listened to what he listened to.
Yeah,
War was one of those albums, and I loved it. And I think all the albums after War to me have declining returns. And you're right, they were adrift. And by the time 87 and 88 came with Rattle and Hum and Where the Streets Have No Name, and that I didn't like U2 anymore at that point. And Achtung Baby came out, and I didn't listen to it right away. It's more of a 1992 story for me, but it's one of those that you look back and you're like, every song on this is great. This might be their best album. And to go from The Fly, I think is the inspiration of the industrial beats that you're talking about, to the guitar solo in Love Is Blindness. I love it. It's literally one note. It's one note in different ways, and it becomes a guitar solo. It's just amazing. And
yeah, because I also agree the early U2 stuff is like so pure, but it's kind of like you want to see that live with like 1,500 people, just totally rocking. And that their music, I think, didn't scale up to everybody wants to see it around the world. They needed like a new, more expansive sound than just keep it coming. I think, like must have been an incredible first tour band when you'd never seen them before. But so many people wanted to see them.
Oh, like the Live at Red Rocks type of thing. Yeah, totally.
That'd be unbelievable.
So kind of where the King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard are right now.
Totally.
You knew we couldn't go an episode without bringing them in somehow.
This is Brian's favorite part of all our episodes is the King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard.
Yeah, just let me finish off though on U2. So you look at that album and you wonder, was it maybe just an anomaly and they got lucky? Because I mean, their very next album, and it comes out 2 years later, Zooropa.
Yeah, Lemon. Was that when Edge was singing? Oh, Jesus.
And then I Pop. I'm sorry, it was just called Pop. That was
before everything was I.
Yeah. And, and then they come back and they put like late career, professional albums that, these are songs that AI could be writing for U2 now. But, this was obviously done there. No, a lot of bands do that. Like you look at the latest albums by these dinosaur bands like Iron Maiden or Depeche Mode or
Whoa, don't bring Depeche Mode into this.
Yeah, but is their last album great, or is it just a serviceable Depeche Mode album?
No.
You like it because it's Depeche Mode.
So I will say this about U2 though. U2 continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, even with these shitty albums, because internationally, like Brazilian audiences were just dying for them. Like, dude, people love them. Yeah. Oh man.
And seeing them live, putting on a good live show matters.
And they had so many songs to choose from.
Exactly. You could play 7 or 8 new songs, and then that leaves time for
2 new songs. Totally.
And then, but then you still have 15 hits that you can
exactly,
and you have 50 to choose from.
Yeah, but Bono ascended a level of like, I'm the biggest rock star in the world. It's kind of like he went a little crazy in the albums after Achtung Baby, to your point, like the Lemons. Like he's just like he's like untethered from reality.
Yeah.
But by the time those later career albums came out, he's the guy who could get up in front of 100,000 people and be totally at home.
Yeah, I mean,
Mick Jagger's the same way. Like, it just doesn't matter how big the crowd is or how old he is.
Or like, where he goes. He goes on the world stage. He's hanging out with the Dalai Lama and
exactly
major politicians.
But Bono was really interested in being the first at a lot of things. Like, so he was like the first like huge type of show, the first video show, the first 3D show, the first people at the Sphere, right? Like, he's like the last 20 years since all these albums we're talking about, he's wanted to be like the biggest, the first, and they've done all these amazing things. And the only person on this call right here, on this podcast, is who went to the Sphere is Bryan.
Yeah, I did. I saw you two there. It's incredible. I got to say, I was really impressed because the Sphere's acoustics are really the draw. Like, the visuals are cool, but it's kind of like an IMAX times 100. But the acoustic quality of a crowd of that size playing, electric guitars is what's shocking.
Interesting.
The clarity you can hear and like hearing the edge and Bono sing. But what I was impressed is, the Sphere tour, they were playing Achtung Baby start to finish. Like, they did that with the Joshua Tree before. That's why I really wanted to see it. And, there's a couple songs on Achtung Baby where Bono's really got to showcase his range, and so he doesn't really do it on the beginning songs. He just takes a few, beats off, and you're like, that's okay. But what I realized through the show is they were just saving themselves for the end. So at the end of the show, where he was really bringing out the classics, like he knew he needed to hit the notes, and he's almost like he timed his vocal cords perfectly to be able to like really bring the house down at the end. It was an impressive musical effort.
Who would be better at the Sphere? King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard or Goose?
Oh my God.
I don't think Goose could handle the size.
That's fair.
I think King Gizzard's a little more professional musician. Goose is still fitting into their big boy pants.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so getting back to 1991, there's a lot of ground that we didn't talk about yet. So we spent a lot of time on grunge and a few other bands. But there is another nascent trend that took over and had a more long-lasting influence than grunge in my mind, and that's shoegaze. So the biggest albums of the year that year to me were My Bloody Valentine, Loveless, which is arguably the most overrated album of all time.
Thank you.
And Slint Spiderland, which took that coffee house spoken word vibe that was popular at the time and put it to dissonant, off-key guitars.
Thank you for saying My Bloody Valentine's Loveless album was the most overrated album of all time. Yeah. Everyone quotes that
out. No juice. Yeah. A lot of squeeze, no juice. I agree.
What happened? Like, how is that even possible? Did anyone just get faked out?
I think what it is no one really made that approach anymore, and Kevin Shields and his band put that together, and they set the blueprint. But so many bands immediately surpassed them. You look at Mogwai is the biggest example of that, but Godspeed You Black Emperor, Explosions in the Sky, any of these long-form, mostly instrumental bands are much more dynamic and much more intense. So My Bloody Valentine were famous for being drony and loud.
Smashing Pumpkins' Gish came out then. Was that shoegaze?
That was definitely not shoegaze. That was alternative. Was that was alternative pop. That for me is their best album. I did not listen. I don't know if I listened to it until the end of 91. Oh yeah, that was one of the albums I also picked up on WGSU as a first semester DJ. But that to me is always going to be my favorite album by them. I think Siamese Dream might have exceeded it in my mind for a little while, but looking back,
I'm with you on Gish.
I'm a Siamese Dream kid. No way. Siamese Dream is possibly in my top 10 deserted islands.
It's probably dessert.
Always wondering what people are eating on the deserted islands anyway.
Yeah, one thing you noted too, the album came out was the Low End Theory. Tribe Called Quest.
Oh yeah.
And this is like 1991 is not there yet, but 92, 93, 94, definitively the golden era of hip hop. And this was kind of like the first wave.
Who has not been in a situation where you're going out with your friends or you're making plans and you say, what's the scenario? Yeah. Like you still, it's part of your just basic dialogue.
Dude, I'm incorporating that in my next meeting with my CEO. That's what I'm going to call all of our future plans.
Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo.
Totally. Ooh, intro music for a meeting. That could be cool.
Yeah.
This is R.E.M. has their first album of their decline. Out of Time comes out. I feel as good as Losing My Religion was, this is the end. Like their previous albums. Oh, maybe this is the same thing you were saying about U2 before. Like between, they never had their Achtung baby after.
Yeah.
After
they never had a new peak.
They never had a new peak. Never. I mean, the drummer even tried to die on stage. That's how bad it got.
Yeah. Well, as good as Losing My Religion was, as bad as Shiny Happy People was.
Yeah.
So
Jesus.
That's the two sides of the coin there.
It really was.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Looking ahead, I think from 91, you start bubbling under the surface. You have house music and you have break beats.
Yeah.
It's starting to bubble up. Rave culture and ecstasy as a popular party drug. We're just starting to, come to fruition. And that's going to inform certainly the direction of music, certainly the direction of the band Ministry.
Yeah. I looked this up too because I thought it was 91, but it was a little bit later. It was the MTV Unplugged series.
Yeah.
So the first one that I could find was Paul McCartney Unplugged, and it was 1991. It's really, again, more 92, 93 when you get like the 10,000 Maniacs MTV Unplugged album everybody had, and the Nirvana and Alice in Chains. I just feel like I associate that with like R.E.M. It's like R.E.M's fault that the Unplugged albums came out.
Yeah, I remember the Eric Clapton one was...
Oh, yeah, ubiquitous. The Clapton one.
Yeah.
Layla. The slow version of Layla on MTV Unplugged is like everywhere.
Yeah. So, bringing it down with Layla, I do have to make two notable mentions of stars who had passed. At the beginning of the year, underrated guitar man Steve Steamin Clark of Def Leppard, who was there from the beginning, total raging alcoholic and essentially drank himself to death in January of 91. And then in November of 1991, we heard that Freddie Mercury had AIDS. And then literally the next day, he died of AIDS. So one star of a huge band and one just phenomenal all-time legend in 1991. There may have been others. Don't at me. This is not the Grammys for getting people.
Did you guys ever see the Freddie Mercury concert after he died?
No.
It's like at Wembley Stadium or something.
Oh, it sounds familiar. Yeah,
100,000 people.
Yeah.
I remember it because they have everybody else singing his part, like guest singers.
That's a terrible idea.
What was crazy, and this is just kind of brings it back to Guns N' Roses. They sing Bohemian Rhapsody, and Elton John is the one who sings the Freddie Mercury part. Until the end, when Freddie Mercury goes crazy at the end, and Axl Rose comes storming onto the stage. It's like peak Axl Rose, and he's in like his Scottish kilt and everything. And so you have Axl Rose and Elton John singing the finale. Nothing really matters, and it's like Axl and Elton is like not who I would have put together in my mind to do this, but
and then they had a big falling out about certain stories that Axl
they hated each other. Yeah. It's a really bizarre combo.
So. Has Elton John played with the most set of people? Didn't he even play with Eminem? Yeah. He has. He comes up in every. I've read 15 autobiographies of musicians in the last year, and I think he's been in all of them.
It's because he's a go-to MTV duet partner for the Video Music Awards. It's like, oh, here comes Elton John out of the crowd, and he's singing with Eminem, or he's singing with Lady Gaga, or he's singing with Britney Spears. They just roll him out for everything. I
think he does a later Alice in Chains after Lane Staley's gone album. So it does a Jerry Cantrell song. I swear, they were like, you know who'd be great for this? Elton. And they're like, nah. And they call him, and he's like, okay. I guess he just says yes. That's probably what his actual skill is.
He's a guy for everything.
Totally. He could do it in a second. Well, 1991. What a year. Me and Steve meet. All this great music comes out. Grunge is in full effect.
Bryan was a high school radio DJ.
Totally.
Right.
That's good. I didn't even know that could be a thing. I'm going to write a song called High School Radio DJ. That's so cool, though. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Bryan, for coming on our show. It's always great when we have new perspectives and great guests.
The honor is all mine. Thank you to both.
And thanks, listeners, for joining us on yet another journey into the new.